Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. You know, a lot of people see me on TV ripping up money like crazy and wondering, why are you doing that? Isn't that crazy? Oh boy, have I got a story for you. Stacy.
Well, let's look up some epic, mind-blowing, actually, money ripping. This is a mind-blowing graphic in today's times on what $85 billion worth of lost equipment means in practice for the Taliban. We'll just name a few of these. Taliban's new arsenal. They have 8,000 trucks, 22,174 Humvees, 126,295 pistols, 33 helicopters, Mi-17s, as well as some other aircraft.
Right, well, this is the problem when you can just print money for free, right? With Bitcoin, it's called proof of work. And you have to actually have a working network to produce it, similar to a gold standard. But on a pure fiat money standard, where the central bank can just print billions and trillions of the worthless paper money, it allows them to do things like, we're going to fight terrorism by invading a sovereign nation and giving them $85 billion worth of weapons of mass destruction and see what happens, right? So obviously that's an insane thing to do. But fiat money like the US dollar and others encourages insanity. And that's why so many people are finding it difficult to survive in this world.
Yeah, a few things, because these same weapons contractors finance the cable news, and you've got to put on a show. So like when Floyd Mayweather fought Jake Paul, there were many who said he obviously held him up to make sure he could keep on fighting because people were paying big bucks for the live stream, for it to be in the stadium and things like that. So you've got to sell them a show. You've got to make it seem like it's some sort of competition. And the other thing is, like, just compare this to the programs that with huge fanfare on the same cable news channels are saying, like, we're helping all the people of America. So they get $85 billion worth of equipment, the Taliban. Remember the rent moratorium? Well, we paid the rent. We allocated funds for the rent. It never made it there, of course, but $47 billion, that was. $85 billion, this is pretty substantial. They want to tax crypto for $30 billion over 10 years. So, you know, this is just showing you the size of how much gear we gave the Taliban.
It's all about proximity. And as we've talked about before, the Cantillon effect. If you're close to the central bank, you get the money first. And you get to put it into things like assets. And then as the money works its way through the economy, those assets go up a lot. And this is how the wealth and income gap is created. But there's also the proximity of the military, right? The Joint Chiefs of Staff and the generals, they are right there in the White House. So they're all day long talking to Congress people, and they're talking to the media, and they're talking to a president, give me more money, give me more money, give me more money. They don't say why they want more money. They have no mission. They have no purpose. They have no agenda. They have no plan. But proximity to the money makes it easier to get lots of money. Of course, they pay themselves lots of money, and there's no richer zip code in America than the ones around the military-industrial complex in Washington, D.C., thanks to all the money they get because of the proximity they are to the money. And then when catastrophe happens, they just walk away and say, oops.
You know, speaking of the White House and the military-industrial complex in the White House, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was in the White House. He served under Obama and then served for a few days under Trump. He was the head of the counterterrorism in Afghanistan and Iraq under Obama. So he was there allocating a lot of these resources, messing up a lot of these resources. But this is an important story because this is like senior guy, connected guy, military guy, you know? And listen to this. Breaking, Chase Bank cancels its credit card accounts with General Flynn, citing possible reputational risk to their company, in case there was any doubt about what is happening in this country. And it says, we are closing your credit cards. After careful consideration, we decided to close your credit cards on September 18th, 2021, because continuing the relationship creates possible reputational risk to our company, the letter allegedly says. And on top of this, the Daily Mail did cover it, and they say Chase sends a letter to General Flynn's wife telling her they're canceling her card because she's a reputational risk to the bank, then backtracks and claims it was an error. And this is all coming from General Flynn and his wife, so just bear that in mind. But nevertheless, this is what we said here on Keiser Report a few years ago, is 3 or 4 years ago. We said once China introduced their social credit score, that it would be coming to America. And if you think that you, Joe Bag of Donuts, sitting out there on your sofa working from home is going to somehow be immune from this, like if they're doing it to somebody like this, sure, General Flynn is a bit wacky, but the fact is, like, he is a powerful guy.
By Chase Bank, we mean JP Morgan Chase.
Yes.
Run by Jamie Dimon, right? Of course, Jamie Dimon hates Bitcoin, and now we know why. Because with Bitcoin, you can't censor a transaction for political means, for political ends.
True.
But over there at his bank, Chase, he can censor General Flynn by cutting him off from his credit card, which is a form of censorship, which is a violation of the First Amendment right, freedom of speech. So it's anti-constitutional. He's breaking the law. Jamie Dimon. Again, remember, he's paid hundreds of millions, a few billions of dollars because he's been a recidivist lawbreaker for years now, and that's his party trick. When he shows up somewhere at the Hamptons or New York, they say, "Hey, Jamie, hi, nice to see you again. Jimmy here can spell backwards. What can you do?" "I can commit fraud and only have to pay a small fine." There, I just paid myself $1 billion from committing fraud. I'm Jamie Dimon, the party trick, right? Well, unfortunately, when you undermine the country like that, the country is going to go into the garbage.
Well, Jamie Dimon party trick is, I'll just show you this simple Google search, what it gave up just for the past year. If you search for JP Morgan, and that is JP Morgan to pay $920 million fine for manipulating precious metals. That was September 29th, 2020. And on November 24th, 2020, U.S. regulator fined JP Morgan Chase $250 million for failings.
All right, so over $1.2 billion in fine.
Yeah.
Okay, he gets away with it because the government relies on Jamie to do things like censor General Flynn in an overt action of political corruption. Overt political corruption, the kind that the U.S. says that they invade countries to stop. Oh, we're going to invade this country and spend billions. We're going to invade that country. Oh, we need to protect the women and the babies. Oh, but here's a guy who's openly corrupt and spending billions and stealing and censoring and breaking the law, but he's, we love Jamie. Oh, we love Jamie.
Well, of course, we do have censorship-resistant money now, which is Bitcoin. But in terms of this, obviously, it's a hyper-partisan sort of environment, especially right now in the United States, where we're observing, and there are loads of people under this article, and they're really happy. Like, half the country is super happy and thinks this should happen. Yet those same people will look at China and say, that's, who knows, like if you can just observe other countries to what would be tolerated in your own, maybe that would provide some more understanding. Nevertheless, like in this situation, so if indeed General Flynn is a risk to their reputation, how about his water company or his phone company, his gas company providing heat for his house, the electricity? How about clothing? Should he have any clothes? Like, why should he be able to wear any brands, right? Like, where does it stop? What's the end of this road of the social credit score?
It doesn't stop. You know, it's a slippery slope, and every utility, every interface he has with the economy is subject now to be terminated on a whim for political reasons and to be completely corrupt. And it is like the Chinese social credit score. And if you comply with the state, and you are part of the collective, and you have your little green jacket and your little red Mao book, then you'll be allowed to get a protein pill and survive another 6 hours. If you want to express your rights under the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, you're considered by this government that's running the show here in America today as an enemy of the state. The Constitution has been outlawed in America, and I think the people who cheer that on are the same people who are going to come crying to the Bitcoiners and saying, I can't afford my bread anymore because of the inflation, because of all the money printing by Jamie Dimon to bail out all of his friends, and I can't eat and I'm starving. And of course, my answer to them will be, ha 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 ha.
Well, this sort of authoritarianism and this mindset is setting in, just like the mindset of inflation. The principles don't actually matter. So let's look at a headline from May 2021. China's social credit system ranks citizens and punishes them with throttled internet speeds and flight bans if the Communist Party deems them untrustworthy. People can be punished if they drive badly, buy too many video games, or steal. It's not yet a unified nationwide system, but China plans on eventually making it mandatory for everyone. In their own documents of 2014, 2015, when they released this, they say this is in order to to abide by the principles of the socialism and communism. Whereas everybody knows, like, they're not even communist or socialist, right? They're uber capitalist. That's because there's no ideology of communism behind this. They might call themselves a communist party and you have to pledge allegiance to the Communist Party, but there is no Communist Party for real.
Yeah, you got to look at the history of China. They have a long, multi-hundred-year, 1,000-year tradition of entrepreneurs building up the economy and then the state coming in and destroying it and shooting itself in the foot. So entrepreneurs in the 90s and the 2000s built up the economy in a strong way. So we can, I'm sure that China will kind of shoot itself in the foot. I'm more concerned with the U.S. torching the Constitution. That seems to be a more pressing problem.
Well, we're following them. As we warned, like when China first announced this, that we suggested, based on what we were observing on the cable news, that the demand for the similar situation would be here in America. And sure enough, the deplatforming started accelerating, so did demonetization, and now cutting people off from financial services. So let's look what they do in China as well, and how you could imagine it here with negative interest rates and CBDCs coming. Well, other potential punishable offenses include spending too long playing video games, wasting money on frivolous purchases, and posting on social media. What happens when Jay Powell decides that your purchases are frivolous that month and he takes some out of your CBDC account, your central bank digital currency account?
Right, exactly. It's a dystopian nightmare. Very Chinese in that respect. Now let's go back to America for a second. It's built with checks and balances throughout the entire system. You got various branches of government, you got freedom of the press, and other things. One of the ways that America kind of saves itself is another checks and balance system. We have a lot of power in the states. And we saw that in the Civil War, that we had a Civil War, and America may go into another Civil War situation where the states who are going to abide by the Constitution are on one side of the Civil War, and those who want to become Chinese social credit score, mimics, are going to be on the other side. I think you know which side I'll be on, and I'll have all the Bitcoin. Hey, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Mish Shedlock of MishTalk.com. Mish, welcome back.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be back on the Keiser Show. Hey, it's been a while, so it's good to see you and Stacy.
We've been following you, of course, as always. You need to pick your brain on some things here. Stock markets and property markets are at all-time highs. Shipping rates have gone parabolic. Shortages are everywhere, driven in part due to record demand, but also a shortage of workers. What's going on?
Didn't you get the word? It's transitory, Max. Now the question is, transitory to what? The Fed looks at is trying to make up for past inflation, which is absolutely crazy if you look at the housing market or the stock market. But we don't count that, do we? We just count consumer inflation, not monetary inflation, not housing, not anything, or not the things that matter the most, actually. So if you believe the Fed and the BLS, inflation's running a little hot at 5.4% or so year over year on the CPI. But all that does is just make up for the negative past inflation, at least so they claim. I don't buy it, Max. I don't think anybody with an ounce of common sense buys.
Something that's new, as far as I know, is this worker shortage, driven in part by the transfer payments that are coming from the government and workers deciding it's better to stay home. They make more staying home than they would making minimum wage at the job. And we're seeing it show up in real time. You go to the store, went recently to some stores, and they just don't have people working there. How are they going to get out of that? Does that just mean they're going to? Isn't that kind of a substitute for MMT? Haven't they introduced MMT stealthily, Mish?
That's essentially what it is. I've not heard it described that way. It's also what Andrew Yang had this proposal, to give everybody, free money. This didn't go quite to everybody, but it went to almost everybody. We had 3 rounds of stimulus that did that, and then they continued this with, pandemic unemployment benefits, essentially paying people not to work. Of course, there were 20, 30 states maybe that said, enough of this. We're going to end these pandemic benefits. And guess what? Workers returned in those states big time, but didn't in the places where they kept the benefit. This is all going to end soon, of course, depending on what the Democrats hide or get passed in this $3.5 trillion stimulus package that they're working on. And the amazing thing about that, Max, is I keep seeing these reports. Well, we've got an outline. We've got an outline. We've got an outline. I go look for the outline. There's no outline. No one knows what is in this thing because it's been at the mercy of a handful of two Republican senators and a handful of House representatives. So they're really just starting to work on this outline, and we're not going to have it until the end of the month.
Well, you mentioned working there and people deciding whether to go back to work or not, but go back to work. In the asset world, where we're seeing price appreciation going up 20% a year or more due to the money printing and the Cantillon effect, where all the asset holders get the money first, they don't work. They just sit on assets. Then you have another class of people who are now sitting at home. They're not working either because they're getting free money. But it's the same. We have two classes in America right now that don't work: hedge funds and transfer payment recipients. We have two distinct classes that don't work. And to get the asset guys to work, how do we get them to start working again? Because all they're doing is just a raunchy economy, and they're just ripping people off, the hedge fund world. How do we get them back into the workforce, Mish?
I think these distortions are going to continue, actually, Max, until we have a huge correction in the stock market. But, as you know, I've not exactly been a prophet here on this. I never ever thought that we would blow another bubble again as big as we did. And it's mutual cooperation. Ben Bernanke once said that the only three opinions who mattered were the Fed, the vice chairman of the Fed, and the president of the New York Bank. I think the new troika is Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, Janet Yellen, and of course, Congress is in on this with, these fiscal stimulus packages that never going to end. And the most disturbing part about the proposal on deck from the Democrats is this energy tax, Max. Biden, AOC are pushing for 80% clean energy by 2030. Max, does anyone outside these progressive think that this is actually possible? And if so, what inflation is going to result from it? I think that's the ticket to stagflation. We don't know what passes yet. We don't even have an outline. But that's the big fear on my mind here is something completely insane passed by Congress. We're going to see stagflation from it. And of course, stagflation is increased inflation and lowering of GDP simultaneously. In other words, it's very recessionary.
To really get into this, you need to kind of do a forensic look at the numbers. And of course, you always do a great job looking at the numbers over there at mishtalk.com. You wrote recently that, quote, housing adjusted real interest rates sank to a record low negative 8.5%. All right, so what exactly does this mean? Elaborate for our audience how you get to a negative 8.5% and why, what this means.
The Fed says that the CPI, the BLS says the CPI, and the Fed quotes it, that inflation is up 5% year over year, okay, 5.4 actually. That's as of June. The if you put housing into the picture, Case-Shiller Home Price Index was up over 18% year over year, 18.6% year over year. Owner's equivalent rent, which is the mythical price that people would pay if they rented their own house for themselves, unfurnished without rent, was only up 2.5%, I believe it was, year over year. That's the largest component of the CPI by far, 24%. If what I did was said, okay, let's substitute housing prices back in there. So instead of going up 2.5%, we look at prices going up 18.6%, and at 24% of CPI. Now you're talking interest rates, negative interest rates, not of negative 5.4%, but of negative 8.5% roughly. And that's all I did. There's so many things, you know, of course, housing bubbles aren't reflected in the CPI. And that's, the spotlight is all wrong. Everyone looks at consumer price inflation. That's not what matters. It's inflation that what matters. This economy is running hot. The Bank of International Settlements has come out many times and has talked about that. Deflation or negative prices at the consumer level isn't really even what matters. It actually gets more goods to more people. Standards of living rise when goods are cheaper and more people have access to them. The Fed is hell bent on producing a rise in the CPI, which it now has, but still isn't happy with because it wants to make up for lack of lost inflation. You know, it's crazy. So how long is this transitory for? It's transitory until we have the next crash or until Democrats do something even sillier, which is put this energy tax on, driving up prices further.
So real rates, negative 8.5%. So you take the 10-year interest rate and you subtract the inflation as you're describing it, if you add back in the things that you should be adding back in. And you
Just
end up,
housing, actually, not everything.
right? And you end up with a negative 8.5% of real rate, the most shocking negative rate we've seen. And so this is something that the Fed is telling us they're trying to fight. They're trying to tell us that this is not the outcome that they wanted, right? So
what they're saying is not exactly that, Max. What they're saying is it's transitory, that it's actually welcome. Powell used the word welcome, but they're hiding under the fact that they don't think this is going to last. Well, if home prices are going up 18.5%, Max, and the mortgage rate is only 2.5%, is it any wonder we have a bubble in housing?
the money printing that they are engaged in is making the interest rate go more negative.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore,
Absolutely.
they're insane.
It is also convoluted. It's hard to get a grasp on this. I don't think we're going to have more on this inflation picture until we see what the Democrats propose and whether or not it passes. But depending on what they pass, I'm looking for a nasty bout of stagflation.
So is that the resolution of the great inflation-deflation debate? We've got about 50 seconds left in segment one. I'll carry you over for segment two. But is this the great inflation and deflation debate we've been covering with you for 15 years or so? Is it going to all resolve in a massive stagflation? Is that the end game?
I don't know, because we don't know actually what they're going to pass. We don't know how the Fed is going to react when they do that. And certainly, if interest rates start going up, I think we're going to see a stock market crash. Of course, I've been talking about this for a long time. A crash itself will lower the demand for housing. So I don't think this is resolved. It is not yet clear that stagflation is the scenario. What happens to the stock market? And we need to see then. a stock market crash is very, very deflationary for all kinds of reasons.
Okay, well, quite a cliffhanger. We're going to carry that over to a second segment, but for now, thanks for being on Keiser Report, Mish.
Always a pleasure to be on, Max. Thanks for having me.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank our guest, Mish Shedlock of MishTalk.com. Until next time, bye, y'all.